Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It is another exciting day for all of us, and we are glad we are having a tremendous guest with us. We welcome in our today's live podcast. I'm Nakibullah, and I'm delighted to have all of you here. Whether you are an educator, a school leader, or someone passionate about the future of education, this conversation will provide valuable insights and inspiration. Today, I am honored to host a distinguished guest whose contributions to education and leadership have been truly remarkable. Joining us is Ann Burgess, an experienced educator, former head teacher, and school advisor in the UK. She has worked with British Council as a specialist advisor in school leadership and a senior policy advisor, playing a key role in shaping education policies and practices. Currently, she serves as an independent consultant working with governments on education reform and leadership development. With her vast experience and deep understanding of educational leadership, I am excited to explore her insights on education, leadership, and the future of learning. I also want to encourage everyone watching to engage with us. Let us know where you are joining from in the comments and feel free to drop your questions. We will try to address some during the session. Now, let's get started and welcome to the podcast. To begin, could you please share with us your educational journey and your experiences as a brilliant educator?
Salam alaikum. Thank you very much for inviting me. I know some of the people will have listened to Peter Hall Jones yesterday, and he and I have worked a lot together, and particularly in Pakistan, and we both have a great fondness for
Mm.
Pakistan and the people we've met there. So it's a great pleasure to be here today. My educational journey it's been a very interesting one. When I went to university, I grew up um, in the middle of England, what we call the Midlands, and had a very happy childhood. When I went to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. The only thing I knew was I didn't want to be a teacher. So that's how I began. But
Oh,
during my time at university, I changed largely because of some of the teachers I met, but largely because of my husband's story. My husband grew up in a not very wealthy family in Bristol, in England, and his parents were manual workers. They worked with their hands, and um, they didn't really understand the value of education. So when my husband was in the sixth form at school, he had a very inspirational history teacher who said to him, "You should go to university." Now, his parents couldn't understand this at all. They couldn't understand what was the use of someone going to university. And so my husband went back to school secretly to take his A levels so that he could get into university. And his story inspired me. And I thought, I want to be able to give opportunities to people like him who wouldn't normally have them. So that inspired me, and I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And when I got my first teaching job, I was married by this time. Um, I got my first teaching job in the town where I'd grown up. And so for them, a lot of the people there knew me as a child, um, and I'd grown up with them. And I was in that school for 9 years. And then we moved to a different city. My husband got a job in a place called Lincoln, which is in the east of England. And we moved to this new city. And that made me realise that I had to make my own reputation. I had always been known as my mother's daughter, my father's daughter, um, and I had that reputation that came from family. But suddenly I had to make my own way. And I very quickly realised that I wanted to do different things in my career. I was very happy as a teacher, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to develop teachers and teach teachers. And I got the opportunity to be an advisory teacher, running courses for teachers, going into school to advise them on pedagogical methodologies and the curriculum. So I did that for a while. And then I became a deputy head teacher and a head teacher. And I was very happy doing that for 5 years as a head teacher. And then my local authority said, come and work for us. So I went to work as a school advisor. And after a little while, I got the wonderful opportunity to work for the British Council. So I went off to London to work for the British Council, and my main job was to develop a programme for the Department for Education on head teacher study visits overseas. And that's when I first realised the impact that international experience could have on teachers and school leaders and on children as well, because we'd had an international project in the school where I was a head teacher, and that broadened children's minds and opened up opportunities for them. So I realised that that was really important, but yet I was still drawn back into school. And my local authority contacted me after a couple of years at the British Council and said, we've got a really difficult school. The head teacher has been suspended. The school governors have all left. Half the staff have left. The parents are fighting with each other. The children are fighting. The remaining staff are fighting. Will you come and lead it for us? And I said, but I don't really want to leave the British Council. And they said, well, please come and do this for us, and we will give you a job working in our most difficult schools to stabilise them, to set them on the right path, ready for a new head teacher. So I did that for 8 years, working in really difficult environments. I don't think any of them were quite as difficult as the first school, but I worked in 6 schools in that capacity, stabilising them, getting them ready to move forward. But then I got the opportunity to go back to the British Council as a senior policy advisor, working with Susan Douglas. And so that opportunity was just too good to miss. So off I went back to the British Council. And that's when I started working in Pakistan. It was my very first assignment on getting back to the British Council was doing leadership training in Karachi with Peter Hall Jones. And that was in 2009. And we've been back many times since. And that gave me a real sense of the British Council as a global family, that I felt a very great connection with the people of Pakistan, particularly because we came back to Pakistan such a lot, but also in other places where I worked. It was like a big family, and the global master trainers were like my brothers and sisters, and the people we worked with were too. And we moved on from working with school leaders to working with policymakers on policy reform and trained trainers. We trained master trainers, and now the system is self-sufficient in that those master trainers train others, and so it's self-fulfilling. And so it's been a great journey. And what it did to me was it also gave me first-hand experience of working of sort of really knowing the people in a place, Because before that, when people had said, oh, there's been a disaster, natural disaster in Pakistan, I felt, oh, what a shame. But now I feel, oh, I hope my friends in Pakistan are all right. It's not just happening to anonymous people. It's happening to people that I know and love and have worked with. So it's given that sense of a global community. And now I don't work for the British Council. Well, I do, but I'm not employed by them. I'm an independent consultant. And I've had the opportunity to work in almost 60 countries in the world. And if that little girl who had gone to school in the middle of England had any ideas of what she was going to do, it would not be that I would have worked in 60 countries all over the world, from China to Mexico, from Brazil to Norway and Finland, north, south, east, and west. And it's been the most wonderful and life enhancing experience. And I have learned so much from all of you. And I am truly grateful for that career.
Oh, that's wonderful to know. Thank you. And yes, one thing is quite surprising for me. I heard from you that your husband's family didn't let your husband go to school. That is quite surprising. We
Well,
have, and sorry
yeah.
to say, we have a lot of cases in our areas. Most of the people
Mm,
don't let children go to schools because of the poverty. They go to any
mm,
mechanic shop, they learn any skill,
mm.
and then they start earning
Yes.
money because they have to support their families.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
in England, I am quite surprised to hear that.
Well, they had no problem with him going to school up to the age of 16. But then they
Okay,
expected him to go and get a job. But he wanted to go to university, so he had to do his A levels. So he had to do it
okay.
in secret. Of course, they found out eventually, um, and they accepted it. But
Hmm.
because he was determined, that's what he wanted
Wow.
to do. And I didn't want children to have to be fight for their education. I wanted them to be able to it to be open to all students.
Okay, yes, and you just mentioned the school that the head teacher was suspended, and
Mm.
uh, is that was that school in a rural area?
It was in a coastal area. It was
Hmm.
fairly rural. It was remote from the centre of administration, which was in Lincoln.
Okay.
It was an area of great poverty
Hmm.
by English standards.
All right. Okay, and as a former head teacher and school advisor, what are the key qualities that make an effective school leaders? What does it take to make a brilliant school leader?
I think there are lots of different types of school leader who can all be very effective. So
Hmm.
I think on the one hand there are characteristics which belong to a particular person, and almost anyone can become a very effective leader. I think what you need to be is open to advice. Um, you need to be very aware of your community and the needs of your community, the needs of your school. I think, there are those personal characteristics, but then there are the skills, which is about handling people. You have to know how to handle people correctly. Um, you could be an introvert, you could be an extrovert, and still be an effective school leader. I was very interested some years ago in a movement called quiet leadership, which I think started in America. Well, that's the place I first heard about it. And it was in an age where it was in the 1980s and 90s when People assumed that strong leadership meant that you were powerful, you were forceful, you were controlling, you you um you were very definitely the leader. And this group of people said, no, you can be a leader quietly. And sometimes that is more powerful than being noisy and forceful. And I thought back because one of my great interests from when I was a little girl is in football. And I was brought back to England's glory days when England won the World Cup. When I was very small, it was 1966. I was very young, but the manager of England was a man called Alf Ramsey, and he'd been a successful footballer. But he was a very, very quiet and unassuming man. And when England won the World Cup, he didn't want to be in the limelight. He's the most successful football manager England have ever had. But he didn't want the limelight. He wanted his players to get all the glory, and he pushed them forward. And he pushed them towards the cameras, and he stood back himself. And he was very, very humble. And I thought then that to me is the kind of leader I want to be. I don't want people to say, oh, Anne's done this, Anne's done that. I want people to say, this school has done this. These teachers have done that. So that, they've done it themselves. And I wanted to be very much the enabler. Now, I know, I firmly believe that in different circumstances, you need different styles of leadership. So sometimes you have to be more directive. And I've had to do that in very difficult schools because the people there are traumatized. They don't know what to do next. So you have to be more directive. But beyond that, once they're stable and they're in better circumstances, you can then give them more of a free rein and say, you have a share in the decision making. We are in this together, and together we will make this school stronger and make it better. So I don't know whether I've quite answered your question, but I don't think there is one leadership style or one certain type of person that is the best. I think we all do it in our own way. We've all got our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that is more than enough, and my question is definitely answered in a brilliant way. And you have been working as a reformer in educational policies, and
Mm, mm.
could you please describe some challenges in this area in reforming education?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest challenge is that people everywhere are resistant to change. And sometimes, and I found this as a head teacher as well, sometimes people will not change until they have to. And my life's work has been saying to people, we have to embrace change and go forward and meet it. Because if we wait until we have to do it, often we have fewer choices. If we decide we are going to do this because we know it's right for our children, then we've got more choices than if we wait until we absolutely have to change because there's no choice about it, and then the opportunities are often fewer. um, I think managing change is a big job for school leaders and systems leaders as well, educational leaders, um, because the success of managing change depends upon how you do it. And I go back to leadership style. If we say, you are going to do this, you have to do it, and you have to do it in this way, people will do it, but they won't really be engaged with it, and it won't be successful. And I think one thing I've learned in my work with policymakers and school leaders and teachers is that any reforms that you put into place, whether it's on a school level or a local level or a national level, um, has to be um, has to be accepted and welcomed at every level. So we have to start with the very highest level. The ministers in government have to be behind it, because otherwise it won't get any further. The leaders at local level have to be behind it, because it won't get out to the schools. The school leaders have to be behind it, or it will never be put in place in their schools. And the teachers have to be behind it. Otherwise, however good the initiative is, it will never be implemented in classrooms. So at all of those levels, there has to be engagement. We all have to be um, on board with the initiative, and we all have to then make sure that it's implemented. And when it's implemented, we have to make sure that it's having an impact on our pupils. Because I've seen some very good ideas that have come to nothing because they haven't been consistently implemented throughout the school. Some teachers have done it, some haven't. And when that happens, that means that some children get a good education, others don't. Um, I've seen it happen at other levels as well, that the teacher knows they've got to do it, but they don't really believe in it. So they don't do it properly, or they're not engaged by it. And so school leaders have to make sure it's not only implemented, but it is having an impact. And to do that, they have to know what's going on in their classrooms. They have to know their pupils. They have to know their teachers. And so they need to keep a track on the impact that it's having, because it's all about impact. You could have a wonderful lesson on paper, but the children haven't learned anything, so it's not effective. And so I think, that's one of the things that I've learned. The other thing is that um, working for British Council and working in so many different countries, we have some very good initiatives, some very good trainings and training material, but it has to be contextualized for the country that it's being used in. So what works in England might not work in Pakistan. What works in Pakistan might not work in Algeria or in Australia or in the United States or in Finland. So we have to make sure that, and I think one of the things that we need to make sure of is that we are sticking to the principles of the training, but then the content might change. So the principles are the branches on which we hang um, our policies and things like that, and the leaves are the content. So it might differ. It's no use using the same case studies in every country. Um, and indeed, the context might change a lot across the country. I've done a lot of work in Algeria, and there's a massive difference between the capital, Algiers, and the mountain region and the desert region and the far-flung bits of Algeria, which is a massive country. So sometimes the context changes within the country: urban, rural, mountain, coastal, desert. So we have to be aware of all those contexts as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. You have been coming to Pakistan on different occasions. Particularly, your work is tremendous in teachers' development. Uh, what key area do you think is most important that today's teachers should develop?
I think one of the things that today's teachers have really got to come to terms with is about new pedagogies.
Mm,
And I know you've done a lot of work on core skills in Pakistan. And I think the role of the teacher has changed tremendously, even in the time that I've been teaching. Um,
mm,
because when I started teaching, it was very much the case that the teachers were seen as the people who gave knowledge to the pupils.
Mm,
And the pupils were not entirely passive, but they were receivers of the knowledge that the teachers gave to them. And I don't
mm,
think that's the case anymore. I think because we're trying to develop critical
mm,
thinking, problem solving, creativity, we want our pupils to be independent learners. And that
mm,
means that the role of the teacher has changed from being the one who gives the knowledge and who controls the learning to the one who facilitates the learning. And I think one skill that teachers need to learn is that they set a task, they give appropriate support and resources, but they then stand back and see how the pupils tackle the task. And what they then need to do is to go around to all the different working groups who are working in collaboration and see where they need to intervene and where they need to stand back and let the pupils carry on. So if things are not going well in one group or somebody's got something terribly wrong, the teacher can then intervene and through careful questioning can talk them through to their solution. So I think that's a huge shift. And I think a lot of teachers find that difficult because it's not predictable. If we give children a lot of autonomy in their learning, then it is unpredictable because we don't know where it's going to lead. But I think we've got to come to terms with that. And those of us who educate teachers need to be able to support them in doing that.
oh, thank you so much. And have you ever worked on education reform in Pakistan?
A little bit, yes. Yes, in the Punjab, yes, yes, I have. Um, and I've always found the policymakers that I have worked
Mm.
with and talked to be very open to change. And I've always found the school leaders to be very open to change as well. Um, and it's one of the joys that Peter and I have had working in Pakistan is that people are so very willing to learn, um, and they have such a lot to teach us as well as
Uh,
educators.
okay, and if I request you to give one piece of advice to the policymakers in Pakistan, what would that be?
um, I mean, I would say one thing is that there are a lot of, or there are still some opportunities for funding worldwide. And I would say take those opportunities when you see them and make the best use of them where you can. And I would say give your head teachers and your teachers the best possible professional development that you can. And that doesn't always cost a lot of money because there is a lot they can learn from each other. I would say develop professional learning communities so that teachers and head teachers are learning from each other. And once you've given people those opportunities and that brilliant professional development, trust them to do the job.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And now we have been observing that AI has been integrated in education, and
Mhm.
but there are still some factors who are opposing the AI integration in school because they believe creativity will be disturbed, and so on. How do you see AI in education? Will it
Well,
support us or
I think, like any brilliant initiative, it can support learning, um, but it also has a downside. So I think whilst we can use it, we have to be very careful how we do use it and introduce it. And I would say I am only a beginner in using AI. but I have found it very useful in presentations. It makes my presentations look much better than they used to. So I'm very grateful for that. But I think I would say the same thing about things like social media. It can be used for good, but it can also be used negatively. And I would say it's very important. And I'm really impressed that you are teaching your children to use AI, because we need to teach them to use it positively rather than negatively. So we can use it to enhance their learning and not to replace their learning. We can use it to enhance their creativity and not replace their creativity or damage their creativity. But it has to be done very skillfully. And I have to say, I am waiting for my son's next visit so that he can give me more lessons in AI. And I might be able to answer your question better in 6 months' time. But
Uh,
I think it is a wonderful opportunity, but we need to be cautious about it.
okay, right. I was in Karachi this year. I had to train some of the school teachers, and one of the major topic was the integration of AI in education.
Mm, mm.
In terms of making lesson plans, SLOs, and some other
Yes,
techniques, it
yes.
could be of a great help.
Mm,
Yes, and you have been visiting different countries, and so far you have been working. You have worked in almost 60 countries.
mm,
That is just amazing and wonderful, and you have been benefiting a lot of people, and a lot of uh, uh, a big crowd is getting helped from
mm,
your insights. I have one particular question in this regard: global education trends that I want to cover in your answer.
mhm.
Having worked in different countries, what trend do you see in education globally? Are there any key practices that all education systems should adopt?
I think one thing that a lot of countries are looking at the moment is educational inclusion, and how they include those with physical disabilities, but also learning disabilities and gender inclusion as well, because a lot of countries are concerned about the education of their girls and young women. So that is a trend at the moment. I've done a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa on inclusion, as well as in North Africa. I think a lot of people are looking at things like 21st century core skills, because a lot of employers across the globe are they're wanting people who are creative, who can solve problems, who can communicate well, um, and who can collaborate. So those are the skills employers are looking for, and those are the skills that we need to develop. I mean, I happen to think they're important skills in themselves, but they also help with employability. And I know
Hmm.
you've done work too on entrepreneurism, and that's something a lot of other countries are looking at as well, and how they develop that in their youngsters. So I think those are the trends at the moment. Of course, they're always changing, but they're something that lots of countries are interested in.
Okay, thank you so much, and that's brilliant. We are learning a lot from you. Um, if you could make one major change in the educational system worldwide, what would it be and why?
One major change. I would want governments to listen more to teachers and school leaders, um, because I think sometimes they make decisions that are based on very good ideas and very good principles, but they don't always listen to the people who are actually working on the ground in the field. So I think yeah, listen more to what teachers are saying.
Okay, and related to this field, I have another question. You have been working in Pakistan.
Hmm.
If you get the authority to change one thing in educational system in Pakistan, what would that be?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. um, um, I would say, gosh, I don't. That's a really hard question. What one thing, what one thing would I change? Um, I would say more communication between the private sector and the government sector, more learning from each other and learning
Mm,
together. I mean, I've worked with both sectors. I've worked with trainers and master trainers from
mm.
the private sector and the public sector. So I would say more cross-reference and learn from each other and give each other ideas.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and I have the last two questions, and the first
Okay.
is, what advice would you give to aspiring school leaders and educators who want to make a difference in their institutions?
Well, I would say, first of all, um, take opportunities when you see them.
Mm, yeah.
And sometimes you need to be brave. Um, and that's on a career level, but on a classroom level as well. Um, and what I've often said to aspiring leaders is, if you really, because sometimes I've interviewed people for jobs, and when they haven't got them, they've said, "Can I have some feedback?" And
Mm,
what I've said to them is, you are a class teacher. If you want to progress in your career, take on some additional responsibility voluntarily and do it really well and show your leadership qualities through that initiative. And people will then begin to see you as a leader and they will see you for your qualities. So that if you're aspiring leader, um, for those to make a difference within your school, I would say again, listen to each other. So head teachers, listen to your teachers, listen to their problems, take them seriously and support them in whatever way you can. Always be on the lookout for the people who have the capacity to make good leaders and nurture them so that you, although they may leave eventually to be leaders somewhere else, you will benefit from their leadership skills whilst they are in your school. So it's about leadership and developing leadership, I think.
yeah, that's definitely. Thank you so much. And yes, my last question, but not the least. What message would you like to leave for our audience, especially educators and school leaders who are passionate about making a difference?
Mm. I would say, um, you are never too small to make a difference. Um,
Hmm.
even if you only influence things in your classroom, you are influencing 30, 40, 50 lives. And
Hmm.
don't ever underestimate that. And the next year, you'll be influencing 50 more lives. So if you make one small change in your classroom, that can be very influential eventually to the lives of hundreds or even thousands of children, and even more if you're a school leader. Um, so you're never too small to make a difference. Don't think, oh, it doesn't matter what I do because I'm only one teacher in one classroom. If you
Hmm.
influence one life to the good, then that's a valuable thing. And never lose sight of the fact that we are here for the children and to give them life opportunities.
That is just brilliant, and we are speechless how to thank you. A huge thank you, Ann Burgess, for joining me on the podcast and sharing such invaluable insights
Mhm.
on education, leadership, and policy reform. Your
Thank you.
wealth of experience, and passion for meaningful education are truly inspiring. It was an absolute privilege to have this conversation. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Thank
It was
you.
just lovely hosting you,
It's
and
been a pleasure.
I hope we will have another podcast soon, and it will be our pleasure to have you again on board.
It would be a pleasure to do that too. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thanks a million.